Thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you so much, everyone who has spoken so far, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honour to be here. In 2001, the porn star Jenna Jameson stood exactly where I'm standing now and argued against the motion this House believes that porn is harmful. At the time, Jameson was described in the media as the queen of porn. She was probably the most famous porn star in the world and probably its most visible supporter. And she won her debate resoundingly with 207 votes to 24. I think now that Jameson would be debating on the other side, because in 2008 she left the industry and she has since become an outspoken critic of it. She's not the only porn star to have trodden that path. Most porn stars, particularly women, enter the industry when they're in their late teens, and most leave in their 30s. And that's typically when their public pronouncements on the industry take on a very different character. That's if they live to their 30s, of course. Tragically, suicide rates and deaths by drug and alcohol abuse are incredibly common in the porn industry, which has a way of destroying the people that work for it. Now, we've heard from the proposition this evening that the new porn is different, that cutting out the middleman and connecting the producers to the creators makes all of the difference. And the proposition have told us that it's not porn per se that is the problem. The problem is the manner of its manufacture and distribution. We've also heard from Cindy just now about feminist porn and ethical porn and all the exciting new ways in which we can transform what everyone knows is sort of not a very ethical industry. But here's the thing about feminist porn. No one cares about feminist porn. No one watches feminist porn. It makes up such a tiny and unpopular portion of the market that really the only function it serves is as a rhetorical device in discussions like this. It's out there, we've opened up, and the market have told us what they want, and it doesn't look very nice, and it doesn't look very feminist at all. Because the thing is, regardless of any ethical or feminist label that you might put on a video, you can't actually, as a conscientious consumer, and I should add actually that a lot of people don't watch porn, just as a brief point of rebuttal. In fact, almost a quarter of millennial men have not watched porn in the last month. This idea that everyone watches porn is not only untrue, but is also a permission-giving myth. It gives us all the impression that it's fine because everyone does it. Not everyone does do it. Loads of people don't watch porn because they have these ethical objections, which are exactly right. And because they know that actually when you look at a video, whatever label might be on it, you can't actually know that the people in it are happy to be there. And just as importantly, you can't know that they are still happy that their images are out in the world. Linda Lovelace was one of the most famous porn stars in her age because she starred in the iconic film Deep Throat. And at the time, she was also one of the most visible proponents of the industry. She did a tour of the UK telling everyone how marvellous porn was. It was only years later that she said that she'd been coerced into the industry by an abusive husband. And she said that everyone who watched Deep Throat was watching her being raped. It's half a century on, and Lovelace is dead, and people are still watching it. When the porn industry is presented with its hideous list of crimes, people tend to reproduce some version of the sexual liberation narrative. We're told that everyone is consenting, everyone is an adult, the women like it, and who are you to say otherwise? Now, of course, you might respond that actually not everyone is an adult and not everyone is consenting in the strict legal sense of the word, given that how many images of children, non-consenting adults, are to be found on even the most mainstream porn platforms, including OnlyFans, as we've already heard from Matthew earlier. But the industry and its defenders are very quick to tell us that actually these people are outliers, and they pivot back to the happy minority who prop up its reputation. And as long as those women are old enough, and as long as they are moderately sane enough, and as long as they say yes at the crucial moments, then they reach the legal threshold for consent, and the industry can do with them what it likes. Excuse me. Taking a woman at her word when she says, "Of course I'm consenting," is appealing because it's easy. It doesn't force us to look too closely at the porn industry, and it doesn't force us to think too hard about how trauma and youth and credulousness and some murky combination of all three can lead us all to do things that hurt or even destroy us. You can do terrible harm to a consenting adult who is begging you for more. And the new porn doesn't change any of that. In fact, actually, if you look very closely at it, it looks an awful lot like the old porn. We've heard already about the precarious position that creators are put in on platforms like OnlyFans. Another problem with the platform is it is not an easy source of income for women in difficult circumstances, or indeed for Oxford University students. For one thing, the income distribution is incredibly unequal. About 1% of OnlyFans creators bring in 33% of all of the income, and most of those creators were existing celebrities before they went on the platform. If OnlyFans were a nation state, it would be more unequal than the most unequal country in the world, which is South Africa. In fact, probably the majority of OnlyFans creators make a loss, given the amount of time that they have to spend creating content and engaging with users. The median creator has just 30 subscribers, but she carries just as much risk of harassment and exposure as her more successful counterparts. The internet is forever. Her images might be seen by a future boss, or by her children, or by her grandchildren even. OnlyFans is nowhere near as dangerous as street-based or brothel-based prostitution, but it still has its perils, including to a woman's long-term relationship prospects, which are also damaged by being on OnlyFans and which have a huge effect on a person's long-term happiness. We shouldn't be surprised by the malfeasance of OnlyFans. It is a tax-dodging corporation that profits from the commoditization of sexual intimacy, and it is owned by a man, as all of the major porn platforms are. It doesn't care about promoting the well-being of its users or of its creators. All it cares about is growth. More content, more clicks, more subscribers, more profits. The historian David Courtwright has coined the term limbic capitalism to describe a technologically progressive but socially regressive business system that makes money by manipulating the limbic system, which is the part of the brain responsible for feeling. Our primitive brains helplessly seek out the stimuli that were advantageous in the ancestral environment. It's the reason why the most successful apps are bright-coloured like fresh fruit and glint like fresh water. We are instinctively attracted to these things. Junk food, gambling, video games, opioids, smoking, these are all examples of limbic capitalism in action. And porn is the preeminent example of limbic capitalism. Because porn is to sex as McDonald's is to food. These are capitalist enterprises that take our basic instincts, pluck out the most compulsive and addictive elements, strip away anything that's truly nutritious, and then keep us wanting more and more. They strip the consumer of health and happiness and money, most importantly. That's the name of the game. This is an industry that harms its workers. We know that. But it's also an industry that harms its consumers. It trains the brain to regard sex as a spectator sport, to be enjoyed alone and in front of a screen. This was not normal. We talk often as if access to porn was some fundamental human right. 20 years ago, there was no access to online porn. For all of human history, we have survived with our imaginations. It is only now that it's considered essential to have access to this incredibly brutal industry. So the porn industry has already proved itself incapable of regulating itself. I mean, this is currently being discussed by Parliament, exactly what regulation ought to be put in place, because at the moment it has failed utterly, despite these, huge companies having such brand recognition. I mean, we're not actually discussing what legislative model that we might put in place this evening. I would be happy to be invited back if that were on the cards. But this is also true of child sexual abuse images. It is incredibly difficult to prosecute child sexual abuse images. They are everywhere. They're all over the web. It's very rare to secure convictions for possession compared with how common they are. That doesn't mean we legalise it. We don't just give up because it's difficult to regulate something or because it's difficult to, define it in particular circumstances. If we can agree as a culture that this is something that is harmful to the individual, to the creator, to society at large, then we should unite in thinking about ways of dealing with it, not just rolling over and letting these vast multinational corporations dictate what sex ought to be and use a generation of people as guinea pigs. We have a generation of young people who are seeing hundreds, thousands of images of adults having sex before they've had any sexual interaction of their own. And the proposition seem to think this is just a price to pay and this is acceptable, and that this is just something that we all have to sort of learn to roll with the punches. It isn't normal, it isn't okay. And what we've seen when the porn industry is given free rein is that this is where it inevitably leads. We try and talk about feminist porn, we try and talk about ethical porn. That's not what the market demands. The market demands more and more extreme content, and it sucks users into this vortex of a dysfunctional relationship with porn. And it removes love and mutuality from sex, just turning people into a collection of relevant body parts. But I think that this is one of those rare problems that does actually have a blindingly simple solution. Whether or not we want to regulate the porn industry, as I think we should, and as the government is currently making moves to, every single person has absolute autonomy over whether or not they directly contribute to this industry. It is so much easier to give up porn than it is to give up factory farm meat or clothes made with sweatshop labour, because we all have to feed and clothe ourselves. But not a single person in this room ever needs to watch porn ever again. I urge you to oppose this motion. Of course I do. But that's actually not what matters. What matters is the decisions that we make as individuals not to contribute to this brutal industry. We know that it's brutal. There is no reason to give it your eyeballs. There is no reason to give it your money. We could all decide now that actually we're not going to allow this to continue.